If you were to bite into a chicken nugget, and I'm talking about your low quality chicken nuggets, if you see little like bubbles or little like pockets inside the chicken nugget, that's the thickener basically expanding the chicken nugget so that there's space in there. And there's two
I
things
see.
that thickener does is that one, it creates the air so that basically you are selling effectively air inside the chicken nugget. And also it's a sensory thing too. So when you're releasing air at the same time, you can really taste like the fatty flavor from the chicken nugget.
Min, all the way from Australia. Thank you for being here, Min.
Oh, thank you, Christina. This is awesome. I'm really looking forward to our chat.
Absolutely. You have a very interesting background, and I'd love to talk to you about different things regarding ultra processed food, the food industry, and your perspectives, how things have changed for you. Can you just flesh out, first of all, what was your experience like as a food technologist? And then that will lead to my next question is what have you taken away from that and what did you learn as a food technologist?
Yeah, I love this question. Um, what I learned as a food technologist, it's essentially being like a mad scientist, um, because you have to learn all the different aspects of science. So we had to learn physics, chemistry, biology, thermodynamics, because we needed to understand food processing, we had to understand food product development. And one of the things that I learned being a food technologist is you have to create food that can be scaled to large quantities, regardless of the category. The category being like dairy, poultry, confectionery, anything of that type. And because I specialize in as a product development technologist, it meant that I was responsible for creating new types of products, packaging, and flavor types. So I learned that, there's textures and flavors and tastes for specifically a mainstream audience or consumer that they enjoy. And one thing I learned as well is that even if a product tastes amazing or great, if it's not marketed properly, it's not going to sell well. Whilst if a like product is got a lot of marketing behind it and it tastes very average, and there's a lot of average tasting products out there, it's going to be great. But um, I learned as well that the food marketing that is out there is actually just downright deceptive and misleading.
I'm like think different questions in my head, but let's just start with tell us about the deception.
Yeah, so I guess it's it's very subtle deception when it comes to food marketing. So back in the day, if you think back to like marshmallows and when fat was seen as the bad guy, before sugar was seen as the bad guy. So if you recall, I'm pretty sure in America they still like have marshmallows. In Australia, they still have marshmallows saying that it's like 98% fat free, which is to imply that it's healthier for you, right? So there's a lot of products actually that were released back in the day that, marshmallows were seen as a healthier treat because it was fat free, but it's loaded with sugar. So
Right.
that's how a lot of these the food marketing kind of play on these specific claims, so that to kind of brush away all the things that they don't want consumers to know, even though it's still part of the product. For example, a lot of people love Nutella, right? However, Nutella has like its main ingredient is palm oil. And without palm oil, Nutella is just not the same. There are alternatives to like hazelnut spreads that don't use palm oil, but it's not the same. So Nutella or Ferrero, they're very specific in how they showcase and advertise Nutella is because they just want to show that it brings so much joy and happiness. And a lot of these food marketeers, they will showcase just the emotions and the stories surrounding the food and not the food itself. And if they are going to market the food itself, it will be like a specific claim. So they might say no sugar added or no added sugar. All right. However, they're going to add something like artificial sweeteners or natural sweeteners to kind of like help it look seem healthier.
When you were working as a food technologist, it sounded like you had some diverse tasks. Were you like sometimes in a lab, sometimes in an office? Like I'm trying to imagine you like with a beaker and then you're in like a boardroom. Like what sort of task were you like literally handling like on a day-to-day or monthly basis?
Being a food technologist, specifically in product development, every single day was different because on the same day, I could be in the lab or the kitchen creating different types of prototypes. And on that same day, I'll have to be in board meetings and like managing projects, delegating, speaking with stakeholders and suppliers. Basically, as a product development technologist, you have to kind of juggle multiple projects. And typically, these projects can be improvements to current products. They could be like new, novel, like products that you have to develop. So, for example, if I had to create a new type of yogurt, it could be, like a new type of Greek yogurt. And you have to make sure that, okay, what is the texture that we're aiming for? What type of cultures do we want in there? And what type of claims do marketing people want? Because typically there's always going to be a timeline of when you want to launch, because the supermarkets say if we want to give you space for this, they want to understand the margins. They want to know like how big the packaging is going to be, because they do a lot of like calculations around how tall a product is going to be, how's it going to stand. And that's where like you typically, what you call your category manager, they will liaise with the people in the supermarket. But as a product development technologist, we have to make sure that we have locked in the type of packaging and if there's any processes that needs to be changed. And it's managing all of that on a day to day, whilst doing like sometimes we have to do like quality control or quality checks for any kind of production that's been done the day before. And that could all happen in a day. And also there's like troubleshooting. So for example, if something breaks down in a factory and you have to get your engineers on board, the quality people, to make sure that if there is a batch being affected by that run, you have to troubleshoot and make sure that, if it's going to be detrimental to consumers if they buy, or if it's missing like its best before date on it, then we have to say, no, we have to contain it before it goes out to the market.
Like, is the quality control ever you actually like tasting things and being like, oh, or like, giving feedback on like the mouthfeel of certain products?
Yes, absolutely. So that was part of the role, is that if a product doesn't taste correct, or it's not meeting the standard that we'd expect, or it's not meeting the standard that our consumers expect, then we will put that product or that run on hold. And basically what would happen is we have to investigate why did that particular product not meet the same sensory standards. Unfortunately, sometimes that product doesn't go out to market because it's going to be detrimental to the brand, the company, and you will have to dispose of it. Like you don't want to release a product that is going to not be of the standard, because when you're making manufactured product, the key thing that you want is consistency. Your consumers are there because the food is going to meet a certain expectation. So when it doesn't meet that expectation, it's up to us as custodians of that product to make sure our consumers are happy. So when we do the quality checks, it's not there for us eating and having a good time. It's literally like we're just eating like 1 teaspoon or less just to check it. And sometimes we might
Yeah.
even have a spit bucket because we don't want to be like
Wow.
ingesting it, because sometimes there might be so many different types of products that we have to quality check. And if it doesn't taste right, so usually an investigation could be, we get other people to check like, hey, does this taste the way it should be? We compare it with other batches. And if it doesn't taste right, then we say, okay, we have to kind of gauge how big that production run was, and we have to kind of claw it back. So if it's already in the market, that's what you call a food recall. And that's not fun at all. So anyone who's worked in the food industry, if they had to do a food recall, it's like that's pretty much like your worst. No, I wouldn't say your worst nightmare. The worst nightmare happens like when the news catches on that you had to recall your product because like this hasn't happened to me before. However, I know some of my like ex-colleagues had to do a food recall because their food product was contaminated or there was a mislabel of an allergen or something like that.
I was going to ask you if you, for a prerequisite for you to get the role that you did, obviously you had to have scientific knowledge, marketing skills, different skill sets, but did they also test your sensitivity to taste? Because I think I would be really bad at that job because I actually don't have a sensitive palate. I have a really bad sense of smell and I'm not that sensitive to taste. So I would not be qualified for that job. So did they actually explore that or they just kind of assumed that you would be fine with the whole quality checking?
Great question. So it will depend on the industry. Some industries do not need a strong sensory standard in terms of because you're gonna have like usually typically you have a team who will also help with gauging the sensory checks. Um, However, obviously it makes sense that like if you want to work in the dairy industry, you shouldn't be lactose intolerant.
That makes sense.
There are some people who try their luck, but they won't last long because why would you want to work in the dairy industry if you're lactose intolerant?
Right. Yeah.
And I think in terms to answer your question around if they actually test, like typically they don't test how well you can taste something during the interview stage, but they will ask what are your favorite products and why. Everyone has a preference, and what we learn in the degree of food technology is how sensory science works. And what we learn is that there are some people born as super tasters. So super tasters have more concentrated taste buds on their tongue than most people. So, and there's a test to do that too.
Does the food industry seek super tasters to help with quality check, or that's not even?
Only if you're working, like, say, in a flavor house, but they don't specifically seek out for it because
Oh,
not many people are super tasters. And typically,
okay.
super tasters are women. Women are known for being very good at being super tasters.
Do typically super tasters, do they feel like a pleasure towards taste, or is there also like, are they also very averse to taste as well? Do you know?
Typically, super tasters can basically pick up more heightened flavors compared to your average person. And super tasters find bitter notes very polarizing. So they can pick up bitter notes and sour notes a lot more than your average person, whilst your average person can't really pick them up. So sometimes super tasters are not fans of coffee because they can really taste those
Right.
bitter notes.
So, Min, I am very curious from your experience in the food industry. I'd love to hear what ingredients that you would recommend that we stay away from, and also how has your eating personally changed from your experiences?
I think a lot of people have kind of said, hey, like, are all of these additives and the chemicals all bad for you? I think to me, it really depends on the type of product that you're consuming because there are certain ingredients that don't need to be in a processed food product. And sometimes you do need them in place. Sometimes you do need those additives in there. However, for me personally, there are groups of ingredients that I avoid, and these are nitrates, which is a form of a preservative, and there are like other preservatives. Sometimes it can't be helped. So, like dried fruit, for example, will have preservative 202 That's a sulfate. And I know from my experience and I understand that you need those sulfates in there because otherwise dried fruit just won't have that extended shelf life as it typically would. Also, when I can, I try to avoid flavor enhancers, which are different from flavors. So your flavor enhancers are like your MSG or monosodium glutamate. However, it's very hard to avoid them, and especially because I'm of like Asian descent, and there's a lot of Asian ingredients, like Asian processed food, where it's quite common to have like flavor enhancers and preservatives. And in Asia, they're not as concerned about food additives as much. Whilst, in Western society, there's definitely more of a highlight around the food additives and whatnot. And to answer your question around how has my eating changed, because I've eaten so much processed food and ultra processed food in my career, I just crave fresh food. Like I crave fresh ingredients. So whenever I can, I will go to the local supermarket. And I can't help that even though I left the industry, I am constantly looking at the ingredients list, the packaging, the nutritional panel of any like processed food or ultra processed food that I'm looking at. That being said, I still love chocolate and chips. I'm not immune to being addicted to eating those like kinds of snacks. I'm aware of the addictive nature, and I actually like enjoy it, but I'm not eating it like I'm not eating like 12 packs of chips every single day. I'm not eating blocks of chocolate every single day. Some of my friends tease me. They're like, "Oh, you're eating that same block of chocolate that you had like 3 months ago." I'm like, "Yeah, I only eat like literally like one block." Yeah, like
Wow,
one
you're one of
individual block, one of
those.
those. Yeah.
Okay. So you had mentioned that you don't eat, I think, chicken sausages or chicken nuggets, or maybe I had read it on your Reddit post, which is how I came across you. I would love if you could expound upon that because I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, so there was a period where I was developing chicken nuggets and had to eat like chicken sausages. Well, it was the same factory that was making chicken sausages. And when I was a kid, I think a lot of kids can like understand that they love chicken nuggets. I mean, who does? I mean, there are lots of adults who doesn't love chicken nuggets. I mean, it's got everything that you want in like an ultra processed food, right? It's deep fried, you know, it's fatty and it's got the texture, it's got that crunch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
all there. It's irresistible to our basic human ape minds. That's your brain is registering, oh, this is really yummy. And if you're gonna have a chicken nugget, typically before I knew how they were made and being in the industry, like you don't just have one chicken nugget. You're gonna have like six, or you're gonna have the dozen, right? And you're gonna
Right.
be dipping
Right.
it in that
Mm-hmm.
sauce because that's how typically people eat it. Almost all chicken nuggets, I could say, is that they are made in a factory, and it's actually there's a whole science behind how chicken nuggets are made. All right, so there's a massive mold, right, that actually makes the nuggets, and basically the chicken when it's like gone through, it could be like chicken mince or a mixture of like chicken breasts. And here's something to look out for. So when you're buying like a box or the bag of chicken nuggets, if it says it's made with chicken breasts, it will be made with chicken breasts. It has to be made with chicken breasts, right? So I would say look out for the kind of like chicken like part that that chicken nugget is made of, because legally that company has to put in chicken like breasts. However, it means that they're using chicken breast skin as well. So the part that makes chicken nuggets so good is the fat. And here's the thing with chicken nuggets, right? So basically, like it'll be an analog of actual chicken breast and chicken breast skin, which is basically taken apart and then put back together. So it becomes like minced up. So it's more easier to basically be like extruded and molded into that shape. So you always get that uniform chicken nugget shape. Then it's pressed into it. Then it's coated and layered with like a batter. So the batter is really important. And with chicken nuggets, some chicken nugget, there's different qualities of chicken nuggets, right? So you have like your high-end chicken nuggets where, I mean, typically they're tenders, right? Where it's actually just the chicken breast. You can actually see like the fibers in those, in that tender, right?
Yeah.
Then you have chicken like nuggets where it's like, it does not look like, it didn't resemble chicken at all anymore. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
basically, sometimes it will be like, it's maybe around anywhere between 70 to 80% like chicken, and then the rest of it will be fillers. When I say fillers, so those are like your thickeners and whatnot, because any company that's making chicken nugget is super happy because it's pumping in water and air. So what the thickeners does in the chicken nugget is that if you were to bite into a chicken nugget, and I'm talking about your low quality chicken nuggets, if you see little like bubbles or little like pockets inside the chicken nugget, that's the thickener basically expanding the chicken nugget
Mm,
so that there's space in there. And there's two
I
things
see.
that thickener does is that one, it creates the air so that basically you are selling effectively air inside the chicken nugget. And also it's a sensory thing too. So when you're releasing air at the same time, it kind of like gives that, you can really taste like the fatty flavor from the chicken nugget. And so basically once it's in the like in the batter typically is just used for, you know, to make sure that you get your crumbs on top of it. Basically you want to put less chicken as much as possible, but basically you need to be able to call it a chicken nugget. All right, so it needs to be still majority chicken. And then it is deep fried. So it's already deep fried in the factory. Then it's deep fried, and then basically it'll be like snap frozen at the same time.
What is it typically deep fried in what type of oil?
They don't use any of the expensive oils. They will usually use like canola oil, sunflower oil. It really depends, but it's usually like the cheaper oil, because chicken nuggets are like a cheaper like product. And companies, if they just have the one type of oil, they're just going to use that same oil for like all of their products. And the thing is, when people don't realize is that chicken nuggets are effectively deep fried twice because they're deep fried in a factory, then they go to like a QSR or a quick service restaurant, and then they're deep fried again. So you got like, you know, double deep frying, you know, for this
Wow.
one product. And that's why people can't resist it, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about my boyfriend's daughter who's like quite a picky eater,
Mm,
and like one of her staples is chicken nuggets,
yeah.
but we all know that it's not the best for her. So tell us about chicken sausages. One question I have is what is, for example, the thing that is most concerning with you? Like, for example, and how does it relate to beef sausages? Are you also as concerned with beef sausages, or is it specifically chicken sausages?
I think it's only just because in my own experience how I've seen chicken sausages being made. Now, I think I'll have to preface that if you go to a local butcher and if they are making sausages, then they are probably going to be way better for you because they typically, your local butcher wouldn't have to put like additives or flavors or anything like that. It's just going to be like a good sausage. But any kind of commercially made sausage, and again, this whole science around how sausages are made. But my experience, what I saw when chicken sausages were made is that, you know, when you get your frozen whole chickens, right? So it's a very manual process for people to like degut them. It's this, there might be machines now, but typically it's still cheaper to get someone to just degut a whole chicken and then they just have to wrap it up in a plastic bag and freeze it. So when that person is degutting the chicken, and if you know that chicken falls on the floor, there is a skip bin, and they will get that chicken and throw it into that skip bin, and that skip bin is used to make chicken sausages. Basically, it's the emulsified all the chicken like pieces that we won't typically eat, and it's in there. But it's usually it's the meat extracted, but it's all the different types of meat, and it's usually filled with like water, like and pumped with like either like nitrites. It's got a lot of salt as well. So I guess to me, like from what I've seen, when people will like, removing the guts from like the frozen chickens and they fall on the floor and it was just, oh, we have to, well, I mean, they'll wash that chicken, but then they'll just use that as the chicken
I was gonna be
sausage.
like, they literally just like, okay, so it falls on the floor,
Yeah.
and then they wash it, and then they put it
Yeah.
like, okay, this is like the stuff we don't care
Care
about,
about,
and we're
yeah.
just going to just kind of like mush it all together
Yeah.
and make sausages and nuggets out of it.
Yes. Yeah. So typically sausages, it's usually typically lower quality meat. Like chicken nuggets, that's typically like a higher standard quality of meat, and then chicken sausages is, it's kind of like a mixed medley of what you could get.
Interesting. And how does this compare to beef sausages? Do you know?
It will probably be very similar. And with sausages, I guess this is all sausages, they have to put in some fat. If you have sausages where they're very lean and, deemed, better for you, it doesn't really work as well as a typical sausage. The whole point of a sausage is that, it's got that fattiness throughout it. And that's why people enjoy them. So almost all sausages that are made, there's going to be a percentage of fat put in there to give
I
it
see.
that flavor.
So, after all that you've seen and the horrors that you lived, and all that you learned, what inspired you to transition into a new job? Like, I mean, into a completely new industry, because you're not even in the food industry anymore.
Yeah.
What inspired that shift?
Yeah, I guess because I was working in the food industry for over 10 years, and it was a mixture of things. For me personally, I was burnt out. First, I would say that for anyone who wants to work in the food industry, it's still a great industry to be in. It's very rewarding. You see things that, as normal consumers, you will never be able to see. You get to taste things that that nobody else gets to taste. You get to like try things before they're even in the market. And like I think I'm so grateful for that experience. And I think despite all of the things that people say, oh, it's a lot of like chemicals and additives. I mean, it's actually a fun industry to be in because I really got to see the insights of like how like the industry is run. And also at the same time, I feel like we should be doing a lot more as an industry. I feel like in America particularly, like, there's a lot of people that are hooked on ultra processed food where their old
Absolutely.
diets are relied on ultra processed food. Whilst in Australia, New Zealand, it's not as bad. All right. However, hopefully it doesn't get towards that direction. But I think with the inflation and cost of living, people like, can't rely on fresh food because especially a lot of families who are struggling, they can't afford fresh food because they just get something that is fast and convenient for them. But typically,
Yeah.
fast and convenient means you're going to be compromised on like your longevity or your quality of life because there would have been like added things in there. I mean, you can't compare your fresh foods to something that's processed. And for me, I was like, well, I've been in this industry for over 10 years and I developed a lot of things and I had like, I'd done my time and I felt like, you know what, if I wanted to talk about the industry and write a book about it, I don't want to do that whilst in the industry because like obviously it doesn't make sense. It'll be like shooting myself in the
You'll
foot.
be a
Yeah,
pariah.
right. You're like, yeah, exactly that, right? So I was like, well, I want to transition to an industry where I can have flexibility and still allow me to be creative. So I transitioned to the tech industry as a user experience designer, and I could see that there were parallels between making physical products and digital experiences. Like the principles are pretty much um, like very similar. Obviously, in food, there's a technical element that you have to be trained and educated on. Um, so in a way, you kind of have to like park that, but then the principles of like how to make sure that your consumers or users are having a great experience. That kind of principle is very similar in a digital platform.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I can definitely see the carryover.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't easy, I have to say. Like, I think a lot of people will like, how did you transition? Like, yeah, I get asked this like probably at least once a week now, because they were like, oh, I used to be a food technologist. How did it happen and all that? So for me, it was about like one, tech is so big, right? Tech is a huge industry. I was like, do I want to be a software engineer, business analyst, user experience designer? I didn't know anything about that because I'm going in like from a completely different industry. And I thought, okay, I just want to get into tech. So I learned how to be a software engineer first, but I'm terrible at coding or programming. So
Uh,
I was like, I can't do this as a full-time job. What else is there? And that's why I pivoted to user experience design.
well, that's even more impressive now because I was thinking, like, that you had some sort of tech background and that you had a background in this and you just kind of like made the pivot. But it sounds like a more drastic pivot now, that there is some carryover in the high level skills and perspectives that you had, that you really made it happen to get into the tech industry. So congratulations. That's
Oh,
really
thank you.
impressive.
Yeah, it was a struggle, and it was yeah, drinking lots of bottle of wine to get through that.
And so now you're working on your new book?
Yes, writing on my new book, um, and what writing this book is, exactly why I'm having this like chat with you is that I want people to be aware of how food is made, and I want to do it from an angle from someone who's actually worked in the food industry. There are a lot of books out there around, ultra processed food and everything. And I feel like they're all written by outsiders. Like they haven't
Mm,
actually worked in the food industry. So
mm,
I'm writing my book on an angle that's written in the food industry. And I don't want to demonize anyone, right? Because it's still people working in the food industry. And, I guess there are some people who are like, oh, they're putting this ingredient so they can get you hooked in blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, I was that person. We're not doing it to
mm.
get you like hooked. There's so these different elements in the food industry, in a food product that I feel people need to be aware of. And I feel that once people get this awareness, that then they can make better decisions for themselves and their families. Because there's a lot of like misinformation out there, and there's a lot of like bashing on this ingredient, and I'm like, people don't understand why this ingredient actually exists. So I think someone asked me about emulsifiers, and they're like, oh, emulsifiers are so bad. And I'm like, hold on, emulsifiers actually do have a function, right? And sometimes without emulsifiers, your favorite products can't exist, right? Mayonnaise is a great example. And there's some ingredients that are actually multi-purpose. So eggs, for example, are a great ingredient, great food. I love eggs. Eggs also act as an emulsifier. So if you don't have like if you say like all those ingredients are bad, oh, I think I want to put in like a balanced view. Obviously, I will be um in the book talking about there'll be some things that I feel that are quite there are some things that are quite unethical, and that's specifically in the food marketing where it's using a lot of psychological, I wouldn't say warfare, but it's a psychological play on consumers to kind of like drive the behavior. And I feel that should be more of the highlight, because if you were to strip away the marketing and the nice fancy like packaging, and you just look at the food product for what it is, then you kind of see it naked, you know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, then this is what I'm actually consuming, as opposed to like you getting this brand of what it is, and it gives you this feeling of joy or whatever that that product wants to give you. Like if you're eating not a Twinkie, that's a terrible example, but well, if you're eating like a chip, or like any kind of like Dorito or like that kind of thing, and they how they like they kind of exploit our human emotions to be buying these products. And those are the kinds of things that get us hooked into buying these products. And especially for young minds, right? Where kids, they can't resist this kind of stuff. So I feel that parents need to be aware of like the type of marketing that their kids are going to be seeing. There's some kids products out there that basically they are made, sometimes they're products out there, they're made specifically so that they know that their parents can't say no to buying it for their kid. All right. And that could be something as simple as slapping on like Star Wars or, the Frozen character on like a chocolate pudding. Right. You
Right.
see that a lot. And I'm like, okay, that kid doesn't need to be eating chocolate pudding. Right. But because they see Elsa on the packaging, they're gonna like nag mom or dad to be like buying that chocolate pudding and there's nothing beneficial about eating that chocolate pudding at all.
Right. I think that's great that you're writing this book. I think that anyone who has a message should write a book. And I think that's great that you have the ambition, you have the experience, and that you are going to be putting these messages out there because these things need to be continued to be talked about. Because you're right. Why should kids be eating chocolate pudding? And people who are in marketing are exploiting the use of certain images to target young children and parents who are buying these things for their children. So I'm glad that you're continuing to talk about it because I think that we should talk about it until that there's more change. So thanks for doing that, and also thanks for being here.
Oh no, thank you. And it's been such a pleasure. And if you have any more questions, or for any of your listeners, if you have questions, please reach out. I'm more than happy to answer your questions and like around how things are made or like done. And I love that people are curious as well. And I feel like we should definitely feed that curiosity as to how our food is made.
That is very generous of you. Where can people reach out to you? Do you have a website? What's the best way for people to be connected with you?
Yeah, so I do have a website and it's just minsheentan.com and they can contact me there. I'm also on LinkedIn and I do have an Instagram as well.
Cool. I will be sure to link anything that you send me in the episode description so that they can connect with you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Christina. This was great. I really enjoyed it.